My thesis is about Dublin's built environment. So if you guys were getting sick of South Dakota archaeology, I thought I'd give us all a break. So my thesis really wanted to look at the way every city is unique in its history, in its culture, and that's really identified through the built environment of any city. And I really focused on post-colonialism and nationalism in Dublin. So this is a quote I found while doing my thesis. The story of a nation is written in the stones of its city by Horace O'Rourke, which was a Dublin architect from the 1920s to the 1940s. And this was kind of my start off point for my thesis in understanding Irish culture in the built environment. So to start off, a brief history of Ireland in case no one knows it. This is a very brief history. But Dublin was founded in 1841 by the Vikings. It was named Du Lin, meaning black pool, referring to the black pool, tidal pool that fed into the river Liffey. You can see that right here, that feeds into the Liffey, and this is a recreation of the Viking village. The Vikings were expelled by the 1040-14, and after that, Ireland was mainly a bunch of small Irish kingdoms run by one Irish high king, and that seat of power was in Tara, which is just north of Dublin. By 1171 was the Norman Anglo conquest of the Irish Isle. This happened for a few hundred years and really started the British influence over the island of Ireland. But the one good thing the British did bring to the Irish was that they made their seat of power in Ireland in Dublin, starting to build up the city of Dublin with the start of what they called the Pale, which was a fortified center of Dublin to keep out the barbarian native Irish. This Norman invasion was on and off for a few hundred years until 1536, where the Tudors fully conquered the whole island of Ireland. This is really the start of Protestant versus Catholic in the country, thanks to Henry VIII. And under English rule for the next 200 years, Dublin really became a very built-up city and was starting to become a modern city in this century. Elizabeth I created Trinity College in Tudor architecture, and by the 18th century, Dublin was the sixth largest city in Europe. And this is also the time where parts of the modern city of Dublin you see today with Georgian houses, estates, and Georgian squares that you see today are built around this time. So, oh my gosh, sorry. So, after the Tudor conquest in 1801, was the Irish Act of Union that formed the Kingdom of Ireland and the Kingdom of Great Britain united into the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. This act caused Ireland to be ruled directly from London, taking all the English Protestant government rulers to abandon Dublin completely to move back to London to rule the country. So leading all these nice Georgian mansions and estates to become slums almost. And this also left Irish Catholics under very harsh, unfair laws, and they were being governed from a different country completely. In 1840 was the Corporation Act, which allowed Irish Catholics to participate in the municipal government, and this is the real start for the push for Irish nationalism and Irish identity. Irish nationalists started the movement for home rule or self-government, This started with multiple rebellions, starting with the Easter Uprising in 1916. This was when Irish nationalists took hold of important strongholds throughout the city of Dublin for 6 days. British forces retaliated by bringing in reinforcements, including a gunboat down the Liffey, which they bombed out the General Post Office and left it in rubble. Afterwards, the British control only grew and the Irish only rebelled further. Then in 1918, Sinn Féin, or the Irish Nationalist Party, took hold of the majority seats of the Irish Parliament, and instead of going to the British House of Commons, they decided to stay in Dublin and declare an Irish Republic. This led to the start of the War of Independence that went from 1919 to 1921. Sorry. The War of Independence was a very brutal guerrilla-type warfare that was fought throughout major cities in Ireland, mainly in Dublin, leading to a lot of casualties. And the climax of the war took place in 1920, Bloody Sunday, where a group of IRA, or Irish Republican Army members, targeted British intelligence officers in the morning successfully, and in the afternoon the British retaliated by firing into a crowd at Croke Park during a Gaelic football game. This led to Britain declaring martial law, and the IRA only became more ruthless in their attacks. Finally, in 1921, the Anglo-Irish Treaty was signed, which was a truce. The treaty gave 26 Irish counties dominion as an Irish Free State, and Northern Ireland opted out to stay part of Britain, and that is where we get the two countries today. Major points of contention from this treaty were that Irish Parliament members still had to say an oath of allegiance to the British monarch, and that Ireland was still not a republic, it was only a free state. This led to the Irish Civil War, because a big part of the War of Independence was to be called a republic. The Civil War was very short-lived and was a victory for the pro-treaty side. But all of this really left Dublin and a majority of cities in Ireland in disarray. So this photo top left is the General Post Office bombed out. The top right is what used to be called Saxville Street, now is called O'Connell Street, a major city street in Dublin. And these two pictures are the bombing of 4 courts that started the Civil War. And this shows the disarray of what Dublin was at 1921 at the end of all these conflicts. So to deal with all this carnage from the war, rebuilding projects obviously began, and political leaders used this reconstruction to create a new modern city in the idea of what Irishness should be, and started to create this Irish culture that is seen through the context of the built environment. So, Parliament member Darrell Figgis said to the Architectural Association of Ireland, "During the past 30 years, there have been many buildings erected in Ireland. With few notable exceptions, not many of them have been such a need awaken our pride. First of all, we must cleanse our mind of imitation and disengage ourselves of antique manners, bring our work to simplicity and truth, shaping each building to necessity, and look for beauty in chastity and proportion. That is the task before all Irish art, and it is especially the task before Irish architecture." In this, architecture started to become political rhetoric and reconstruction an active symbol for the new Free State. This led Ireland, and specifically Dublin, into the revolutionary style architecture that really took shape in the 1930s with the internationally influenced and modernist style of Art Deco. Art Deco was first displayed at the International Exposition of Art in Paris in 1925. It's known for its sleek styling and anti-traditional elegance. It relies on simple lines and geometric patterns and uses mostly metal materials. So Dublin started to look at this international, non-traditional stylings in its reconstruction of the city. And it started with a prominent entrance to one of its major shopping streets, Grafton Street. This is Noblet's Corner, named after Noblet's Confectioners that was in this building from the 1920s to the 1950s. In the 1930s, it went under major refurbishments and included a new modernist facelift on the facade. You can look at the 3 distinctive Portland stone bandings, creating a strong horizontal emphasis, and the brick pillars, creating texture and kind of giving you a break from that horizontal emphasis. It also has 2 pilasters framing the whole building with inlay showing the thickness of the wall and giving a sense of theatricality to the building. And also it's capped off with a rounded tower at the top, giving more emphasis to this corner. So this building took some of the flashy stylings of Art Deco we kind of know in our mind today and really created a more modest and simplistic versions using materials that are already seen throughout Dublin City, like the Portland stone and the brick, but included the stylings of Art Deco, kind of creating this inherently Irish architecture. Noblet's Corner kind of became a landmark of the city in this new modernist Art Deco style, and was the government's showcase of its new design for the city. The 1940s brought about global warfare. Ireland was not involved. They were neutral, but they still felt the burdens of the war. They called it the emergency, and it was really a decline in the nationalistic architecture at the time. And so at that time, Dublin was becoming a booming industrial city, and people were flocking to the city center for new jobs, increasing overcrowding and increasing slums. So at this time, Dublin, the Department of Housing Architects started creating practical housing throughout the 1940s, and in 1945, they created this building called Killarney Court. It is a place of public houses in the inner city. It is a quadrangle building around an open courtyard. Its facade is composed of red and yellow bricks, dressing around the windows and the corners with this smooth rendered painted wall on the 3rd floor and a painted line separating the ground from the 1st floor, creating that horizontal emphasis. And it also has a grand entryway with Art Deco style buttresses, and that entryway kind of stands very prominent as it's all red brick, creating a vertical emphasis. So Killarney Court, looking at it, it's no landmark to modernist architecture. It's very practical in its design, but it continues to carry over those new modernist Art Deco stylings. The building is characterized by its cohesive designs and the use of Art Deco detailing from the new Irish architecture from the 30s, but Killarney Court lacks any distinction and leans toward the practical. The 1940s was a decade that showcased this necessary architecture, displaying the people's needs in lieu of this beautified and idealized nationalistic version of what the architecture was leaning toward in the 1930s. So the 1950s began, and Dublin fully stepped into the modernist era at this time. The innovation of modernist architecture in this decade bound Dublin forward, where international trends were not not only being imported into Dublin, but Dublin was being seen as a leader in these modernist designs. So with this building, this is Busaris. This is the, still is the city's central bus station. So at the time in the 1950s, Dublin officials all agreed that there was a major need for better transport facilities in the city. And after a rocky start with multiple location changes, multiple design changes, and financier changes, the city of Busaris still stands today as the modernist ideal of what Dublin wants. After losing its original financier company, the new Free State government stepped in and took control over the project. They ended up debating over the original design plans. However, these debates didn't really take into account that the architect Michael Scott created this beautiful landmark to modernist ideals that only functionally really worked as a central city bus station. They also didn't take into account that this building was already gaining architectural intrigue across Europe and the international stage. The building was already on the world stage as Europe's first post-war modernist building. Quote from the Irish Times at the time says, "Busaris was the biggest single building project started in Europe after the end of the war, and architects came from far and wide just to see it under construction." The building finally finished in 1953, and it has a detached 7-story over a concealed basement office block on the east-west axis with a second 4-floor block to the south forming an L shape. The ground floor is a curved bus station that forms a connection between the two ends of each block. The facade has glazed walls on the north and south, overhanging Portland stone on the east and west, and Roman brick covering the ground floor. The design of Busaris' facade follows the form of a geometric layout, having concrete vertical bands separating each window, and really brings a verticality to the building that brings the viewer's gaze upwards to take in the magnitude of the whole building. But the centerpiece and the eye catcher of this building is the canopy. This canopy is carved from 7.5 centimeter concrete and creates a creative and ornamental piece to the building and is the centerpiece for the contemporary design of the building. The building creates this beautiful intermix of the practical of a central city bus station and office buildings with the beautiful modernist designs that the Irish government was looking for. Oh, not yet. So this building still stands today in Dublin as a modernist work of art. Architectural design states it can easily be claimed to be one of the masterpieces of modern architecture. This building is what put Dublin on the map as a leader in modernist design and architecture. And Busaris has become a marker of national identity and is recognized on the international scale. So, looking at Dublin as a post-colonial city, the city of Dublin will forever be marked by its colonizer past. There is no forgetting that Ireland has used British practices, especially seen within its buildings. But following the nation's separation from its colonial powers, the architecture shows the dynamic of a liberated city built on brandishing its independence. The city grew around the idea of pushing toward the modern and changing the status quo from its colonial past. You can see in these pictures of Dublin today, these historic buildings that connect the city to its colonial past, next to or even built upon by new modernist designs. By looking at the fabric of the city of Dublin today, you can see the unique cultural identity that interweaves its past colonial presence with its fledgling nationalistic modern cityscape. These are the references I used throughout my thesis. Some books, they're very good. So yes, that's it.